On August 14th, 1999, Macho Man Randy Savage, one of the most famous and recognizable wrestling stars there has ever been, tangled with famed NBA bad boy Dennis Rodman at WCW's 4th annual tie-in with the Sturgis, South Dakota motorcycle rally. Ultimately, the simplistic brawl between two aging icons of different sporting worlds proved unmemorable, a forgettable part of a forgettable card for an increasingly forgettable World Championship Wrestling product. In fact, on the surface, all that's particularly notable about the match is that it marked the last true participation on Savage's part in a major pay-per-view bout. But how exactly is it that the legendary Macho Man went out with a whimper rather than a bang? This is Behind the Match. Over the previous quarter of a century, Randy Savage had built a legacy in wrestling predicated on flash, bombast, and an artistic sort of mayhem that mixed primal rage with graceful movement. It was that spellbinding paradox that eventually launched Savage into the industrial stratosphere, allowing for a year-long run as WWF champion in the late 80s, while bringing with him fame and endorsement deals that aren't afforded to just any old grappler. Savage has headlined WrestleManias, he's been the face of international promotions, wrestled in acclaimed matches with stars of comparable fame, and has forever entrenched himself in the foundation of pop culture. And that's why it's a little surprising to see his time in pro wrestling's mainstream end so unceremoniously. By the summer of 1998, the once limber and cat-like Savage was badly ailing. The toll of working a highly physical style for more than 2 decades, and one that was heavy on leaps from the top rope, had slowed the now 45-year-old Savage to a veritable crawl. A reliable big match performer as recently as the previous year, his wars with Diamond Dallas Page affirm as much, the ravages of time had apparently finally caught up with the Macho Man. Throughout the first half of 1998, he continued to push forward on 2 very bad knees, and could only do so much in feature matches against Bret Hart, Sting, and others. And at the start of the summer, the multi-time world champion took a long hiatus in order to recover from a pair of knee surgeries. At 45, Savage's days in a slicker, faster-paced wrestling industry, even if his home promotion still afforded prime positions to the 40-somethings, appeared to be numbered. Following a lengthy rehab process, his proper return to the fold came in the spring of 1999, but not without major changes to his iconic aesthetic. He began pulling his hair back into a ponytail while wearing biker caps and darker sunglasses. The jackets and shirts he wore could still be classified as flamboyant, but less like the Savage of old and more in an aging rock star trying to change with the times sort of way. And to round it all out, his physique had greatly expanded. Although he was quite muscular in his prime, this updated version of the Macho Man was much more top-heavy than we were accustomed to seeing, with biceps roughly the same circumference as a cruiserweight's waist. To augment his appearances, Savage brought in a new valet, his real-life girlfriend, then 23-year-old Stephanie Bellas, who was given the ring name Gorgeous George. Like Miss Elizabeth before her, Bellas complemented Savage's aesthetic, as where Elizabeth's elegance and glamour melded with Savage's glimmering pomp of the time, Bellas was more leather-clad, playing on the sort of underground rock star vibe that was Savage's 1999 motif. It then wasn't long after Savage's re-emergence that the now 46-year-old Macho Man kicked off one last main event run, gunning for the WCW World title now held by Kevin Nash. This would lead to the infamous angle where Savage orchestrated what looked for all the world to be attempted murder. Savage set up Nash, who was seated in the back of a limousine, to be struck by an unknown assailant driving a white Humvee, apparently killing the world champion 6 days before their title match at the Great American Bash. The mystery of who the unseen motorist actually was had a bit of intrigue to it, but we'll come back to that later. Despite apparently dying on live television, Nash of course made it to the pay-per-view, doing little more than just selling abdominal soreness. He defeated Macho via disqualification in a 7-minute match that demonstrated just how limited Savage had become as a wrestler, seeing as 90% of his physical contributions were punches and kicks. Still, Savage remained in the main event picture and actually won the title from Nash in a tag team match at the following month's Bash at the Beach. The reign lasted just 1 day, however, as he lost the belt on the next night's Monday Nitro to Hulk Hogan, marking the 3rd time that the Hulkster went over his old Mega Powers frenemy for a world title. And with that, Savage never again wrestled for any world championship. There would be no rematch at, say, August's Road Wild pay-per-view because WCW had another opponent opponent in mind for him for that night. Re-enter The Worm. Polarizing basketball star Dennis Rodman was re-signed by WCW in June on a 5-show deal that included 4 TV appearances and 1 match at Road Wild. A year earlier, Rodman won his final NBA title as part of the soon-to-crumble Chicago Bulls dynasty. And a month following that title win, Rodman wrestled alongside Hulk Hogan in the main event of the 1998 Bash at the Beach against Diamond Dallas Page and Rodman's NBA Finals nemesis, the mailman, Karl Malone. While the match was derided as a farce in large parts thanks to, shall we say, lethargy on Rodman's part, Bash at the Beach did big business on pay-per-view. The mainstream attention garnered by Rodman and Malone's crossover grudge went a long way in the Bash garnering 580,000 buys, making it the second most bought pay-per-view in WCW history. For his, shall we say, participation in that one match, Rodman pocketed $2.25 million, but later sued WCW, believing he was owed an additional $550,000. The case was settled in June of 1999, and at the same time, a new 5-show deal was rubber stamped. So yes, Rodman's name and celebrity had benefited the company before. The problem this time around is that Rodman's mainstream appeal wasn't as strong as it was a year earlier, in part because the aging star was becoming increasingly ineffectual in his primary sport. At age 37, Rodman played 23 games for the LA Lakers in the strike-shortened 1999 season before getting released. There, he posted his lowest scoring average ever and his lowest rebounding average in 9 years. Once a hawkish defender that aggressively fought for the loose ball, it was quite apparent that Rodman was, like many star players before him, trudging through the harsh winter of his storied career. There would be no NBA Finals appearance for him this time, thus one less major public forum to build interest in any of his future wrestling endeavors. And you can also forget about his initial appearance to build to the angle with Savage, because Rodman no-showed the July 5th episode of Monday Nitro at the cavernous Georgia Dome. He did turn up 2 weeks later though in order to attack Savage with a purse when Savage was in the midst of beating rising star Billy Kidman senseless. While Rodman did receive a favorable reaction for his run-in, perhaps in part due to Nitro taking place in Rockford, Illinois, less than 2 hours drive from Chicago, the segment was a jumbled mess, including a disquieting appearance from actor Robert Wool, who was in character as sports agent Arliss Michaels, the titular character of his HBO sitcom. You have to understand that in 1999, WCW didn't meet a D-list celebrity that they didn't try to cling to like a desperate barnacle. The Rodman appearances continued to mostly underwhelm, as he almost never spoke. He kidnapped Gorgeous George in an angle that would certainly not fly today, and he made several goading comments to Savage that earned him a fair amount of mixed reaction. After one segment in which Savage and Rodman exchanged language that went well outside of the boundaries of WCW's family-friendly programming, commentator Eric Bischoff apologized for both men's comments and quickly went to a commercial before Rodman could reclaim the microphone. The angles also didn't amount to much in the Monday Night Wars, as Raw was routinely stomping Nitro flat by this point. One thing worth noting is that on the July 26th Nitro, when Savage hit the ring to attack undercarders Lash LaRue and Prince Iakea before Rodman hit the scene, the show lost 1.2 million viewers for that segment. Raw ended up doing its highest rating in 2 months that night, more than doubling Nitro. But it's hardly fair to blame WCW's woes entirely on a half-baked wrestler versus NBA star feud. One show was hot and the other was Nitro. About the only genuine mainstream attention the match earned came 4 nights before the pay-per-view when Savage and Rodman got into a fight on the set of The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. Yes, the same Jay Leno who main evented Road Wild 1 year earlier. And by this point, Leno pinning Bischoff really did feel like the faded glory days. But the match in Sturgis kicked off with Rod the Bod wearing a rather ornate robe over the top of his standard street fighting attire, asking Savage where his bitch was, to which Savage retorted that tonight Rodman, you are my bitch. Rodman got the advantage, keeping Savage grounded with some elementary offense, including a Russian leg sweep while still wearing his sunglasses. Referees ended up as collateral damage, and Savage even beat up a bloody cameraman. In fact, for a while, the two seemed more than content to just attack bystanders than each other, as this supposedly heated battle moved at a glacial pace. The fight then spilled to ringside, turning into the typical walk and brawl of the era. And this was certainly for the best, given each man's physical limitations promotions in 1999, as well as Rodman's dearth of wrestling experience. In the match's most daring moment, Savage took a somewhat crazy slide down a rampway adjacent to the entrance stage. He countered by throwing some poor bastard out of a nearby porta potty before shoving Rodman into it, and then knocking it over. A presumably pungent bit of spillage then leaked out of the bottom, perhaps an unintentional commentary on WCW's state of being at the time. And then, after the fourth ref bump of the match, Gorgeous George hit the ring and gave Rodman a low blow. Savage then walloped the all-star rebounder with a chain-wrapped fist to score the victory, without once ever resorting to or even teasing the flying elbow smash. In fact, most of the traditional wrestling holds employed in the 11-minute skirmish came from Rodman, elementary as they were. That bare-bones smoke and mirrors scuffle with Rodman, however, was all but forgotten by the night's end, especially when Savage got involved in a much more notable altercation away from the cameras. Following the main event, in which the red and yellow wearing world champion Hogan defeated Nash to both retain his title and retire Big Sexy, an irate Savage confronted the very Hogan he'd long had a complex relationship with. As reports have indicated, Savage accused Hogan of getting the alluring Humvee driver mystery killed off. He also accused him of having Sid elevated into his spot as the lead heel, among the re-airing of other various grievances between the two, dating back for over a decade. As a result of this latest spat between two superstars that seemed to renew hostilities more than the Gallaghers, Savage no-showed Monday's Nitro, as well as WCW's upcoming spate of live events. This led to WCW drafting Bret Hart, who was still at a crossroads following the tragic death of his brother Owen, to work those house shows in world title matches against Hogan. After years of neither WCW or WWF coming through on a Hogan-Hart program, these matches might have done stronger business had they been advertised well in advance. Instead, the Hitman had his world title series with Hogan 6 years too late in a different promotion and untelevised, and it only happened because Savage erupted at Hogan once more. Not that Savage's absence has really put a dent in WCW's fortunes. The promotion was already in disarray when he walked out, and not even a match with a previous curiosity like Rodman was going to fix the litany of woes. While Road Wild's 235,000 buys were the most for a WCW pay-per-view in 4 months, that's not exactly saying a whole lot. Those 235,000 buys were down 100,000 from the previous year's event, and didn't even muster half of the buys of Rodman's previous in-ring foray 13 months earlier. The previous mainstream attention towards Rodman's unpredictable antics and bizarre behavior just wasn't there anymore in 1999. More than 2 months following his hasty walkout, Savage appeared with George on Nitro at the advent of the Vince Russo era. Bedecked in a shimmering red hat and suit, Savage discussed passing the torch to someone, but wherever that was meant to go was never again touched upon. He disappeared once more from WCW television with zero follow-up to his promo. Early in 2000, Savage wrestled 2 matches that most of his fans probably aren't even aware of. One was a loss to Rick Steiner at New Japan's annual January 4th card, not yet named Wrestle Kingdom, and the other was a house show match with Sid Vicious 2 nights before the sold-out pay-per-view before 6,000 fans in Charleston, West Virginia. The Macho Man only re-emerged once more on WCW television, randomly appearing in a battle royal on an episode of Thunder that aired close to 6 months after his torch-passing promo. There was no follow-up to that appearance either, and it marked Savage's last overall appearance for the company. And here is where we have to admit that Savage did actually have one more pay-per-view match, but saying that he wrestled in it is a bit of an exaggeration. At the end of 2004, Savage, around his 52nd birthday, was giving it one more go in TNA, giving whatever rub he may have had left to the young promotion. As part of the build to an eventual world title match between he and Jeff Jarrett, Savage was scheduled to team with 2 future WWE champions in Jeff Hardy and AJ Styles against Jarrett, Nash, and Scott Hall at the Turning Point pay-per-view. Before the match, Savage was stuffed into the trunk of a car by the heels, ostensibly taking him out of the match entirely. But the valiant Savage made it back to the ring during the last 90 seconds or so of the bout, where he delivered a few strikes and a sleeper hold before pinning Jarrett. Sometime before Savage was to wrestle Jarrett at Final Resolution the next month, the famed Macho Man pulled out of the title match and the promotion altogether. He was calling it a career after 30 plus years, and aside from occasionally resurfacing for film or commercial opportunities, Savage remained largely out of the spotlight until his death in May of 2011, at the age of 58. The match with Dennis Rodman at the 1999 Road Wild didn't seem all that historic at the time, and certainly it's no lost classic when viewed with 2 decades of hindsight. And yet, it can just about be said that the match definitively marked the end of Macho Man Randy Savage in active wrestling canon. That cup of coffee with TNA aside, Turning Point only did between 15,000 and 20,000 buys, so Yeah, Savage's last ever pay-per-view match that he was a part of from start to finish was about as arbitrary as it got. It didn't come at a WrestleMania, where 70,000 plus fans could applaud while chanting "Thank you, Macho" through a tearful curtain call, nor did it come against the next big superstar, for whom retiring someone of Macho Man Randy Savage's caliber would have been a fact worthy of their epitaph. Instead, through injuries, timing, professional issues, and the way that a world with few guarantees works, the man who defended the WWF Championship in the first wrestling pay-per-view to do 700,000 buys angrily bolted from WCW Road Wild a decade later, with nobody, likely not even him, realizing that he was advancing toward a professional sunset of sorts.